Hello and welcome back to my review of It, the novel. Today, fittingly, I am in a basement actually recording this, and it feels very fitting for Stephen King. This chapter was divided into 6 sections again, and oh my goodness, there's a lot to cover. This chapter was called Walking Tours, and leaving off from the last chapter, all 6 of them are going to isolate themselves and then go and find their individual places and see what they find. This first section was called Ben Hanscom Makes a Withdrawal. I liked this one, I think maybe the best of all of them. Ben finds himself at the library again, just for old time's sake. We get a little bit of insight into his past and the things he used to do to entertain himself, and there are some Stephen King-isms in there. And we get to a scene where he's making a library card, just for old time's sake, and this is the part I really liked. Pennywise talks to him from the balcony. Interesting thing in this part is it looks like, from what's going on, that Pennywise, or the monster, or it, is able to read their thoughts. Because whenever he's thinking about something, then the clown, or the vampire, seems to always know what he's thinking. It always seems to preempt his thoughts and answer his questions. I actually, for the first time, was laughing about some of the things that Pennywise was saying, because he was telling some corny jokes. But then what he said started to unsettle me, which was probably the point, so that's good. He said, "Oh, is your refrigerator running?" and stuff like that. So, it was kind of funny. But he was just terrorizing him up on the balcony. We get more mentions of things like the silver dollars, which I think they said they made into silver slugs. So maybe they were bullets or something. They said something about the turtle, and just different hints dropped in here and there, little things that we don't really know what they mean yet, but calling back to things that we've learned before. So overall, first section, liked it. Next section was called Eddie Kaspbrak Makes a Catch. I think this one was the scariest, arguably. I did like how they did a lot of, or how Stephen King, rather, wrote a lot of catch-up history about the past of Derry. So we hear again about Belch Huggins in this chapter, and we learn about them playing baseball in the field in the Barrens, and all kinds of stuff. But basically, Eddie goes down to the field, and he starts seeing things, and then people start popping up out of the ground like zombies, and he gets chased, and we just hear a lot of backstory about the past, and we're getting more of the thing where the clown is coming back to haunt them. Interesting thing happened at one point. As the clown was climbing the fence, Eddie actually heard the air pop around him, and the clown reappeared somewhere else. So it was almost like the clown is actually a solid object, but yet it can read their thoughts and appear and disappear. What does that mean? I do not know, but I did like this section. I forgot to mention something in the first section, and I apologize that I'm doing this a little out of order, but here it is. Ben says this thing where he basically is thinking kids are better at handling these sorts of frightening, otherworldly catastrophes. They're better at handling those than adults are, because adults tend to have a very rigid view of the world and what can and can't happen. And when something like what's happening to them happens, adults tend to either accept it, in which case they are basically sounding crazy, or they have to basically lose their minds. I think that's what he said. Something about that. Things like this that stretch what you think is possible as an adult tend to drive you crazy. Versus kids, they already kind of engage in magical thinking. So when something like a monster appears to them, it's just another thing they have to face. I liked that a lot. This next section I have written down as Bev Rogan Pays a Call. I'm not sure if that's correct, so I apologize if I got that title wrong, but I definitely remember this section very well. Bev goes back to see her father at her old apartment, and this woman answers the door, says he used to live here, and takes her into the house, and basically, none of it's real. And she figures out that the house is actually the house from Hansel and Gretel. And as she goes through this, we get sort of this classic horror trope where what she thought she was saying was actually something else. And everything starts turning to food, and I'm vastly underselling the scariness of this, but in the moment it was pretty scary. Her father appears to her and says some very abusive things to her, and sort of like the things that the leper said to Eddie, but a lot worse. Beverly goes outside of the house and looks back and realizes that it's all boarded up and none of it was real. But the clown still chases her for a little bit, I think. And this is interesting because it makes me wonder, how much can the clown really affect their perception? How many entities can it take on at the same time? and what devices is it using to actually get them. I should throw in at this point that I read this about a week ago, so my memory on it is a little bit scant, and I apologize. But it did raise some questions, and it was very effective at delivering the disturbing content. Once again, I forgot to mention something earlier, but they did say that they went down into the holes, into the sewers at one point. Those little things that Ben saw when he was running from the bullies. They called them the Morlock holes, I think. So, that's interesting. I guess they get down there through those at some point in the 50s, because that's where the voices were coming from that Ben thought he heard. Next section is called Richie Tozier Makes Tracks. This one was pretty memorable too. He sees a statue that was put up in this park, and long story short, it comes to life and almost attacks him. Another interesting thing is there's a little child that seems to see the statue moving, but his father doesn't seem to. That's interesting. Or maybe it was a girl, I don't remember. But statue chases him, and eventually it goes back to normal. And I don't remember exactly how he stunned it, but I think Stanley Uris also saw something while birdwatching. So this is twice that this has happened with birdwatching, and then Mike Hanlon saw the giant bird while he was down in that little factory field. So, interesting. A lot of stuff about birds. Oh, and also it says at some point, he, and I think either Bill or Ben, escaped from a fire. We're just getting all kinds of little short snippets here and there. Very interesting I keep saying non, and that keeps scaring the crap out of me, but very interesting non-linear storytelling. So this chapter is very interesting. This section is very interesting because it's called Bill Denbrough Sees a Ghost. And I thought for sure I knew what was going to happen in this chapter. You think you know what's going to happen from the title, but you don't. Because I was fully expecting Georgie to come back and be like, "Bill, you left me, Bill," or something like that. That hurt my voice. I shouldn't do things like that. But that did not happen. Instead, Bill Denbrough goes back and he buys his bike. He buys Silver. Hi-ho, Silver! He goes back and he buys his bike from this bike shop. Now he has Silver. And then the next section that leads into that is Mike Hanlon makes a connection, and he just goes and finds Bill. And this thing happens where they try to put playing cards in the bike, and then they fall down, and then they're at different... Basically, there's an impossible card in the deck. Ooh, no. I don't know what that means, but I like that the chapter didn't end with horror, because you were fully expecting that one to be the worst scare, and it wasn't. They just went and they got their food together, and Bill went and ate with Mike, and that was kind of the end. But I'm glad that he got Silver back. I'm sure it's going to play some important role. So overall, I did like this chapter. I know I kind of was a little bit more forgetful this time because it was a while since I actually read it, and I apologize for that. But I did like us getting snapshots back into the past. I always kind of like that. And I'll be excited to see what happens next time. So, if you like this content, be sure to like this content because I will be making more of it. And until next time, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.